Hi, I'm Shaima Lashman.
And I'm Iman Talawi.
And this is our video. This document is an excerpt from a press article published in November the 16th, 2016 from the Washington Post. It's an article written by the actor, activist and social media maven George Takei. In this excerpt, Takei explains what happened to Japanese people and especially to his family during World War II and how Donald Trump, who has just been elected at that time, and his administration are talking about it. He also warns people living in the USA about how the same thing might happen to Muslims nowadays if they let the government vilify this community the way they did to Japanese people a few years ago.
As previously said, at the time this article was written, Donald Trump had just been elected and a hateful atmosphere against Muslims was starting to reign. Furthermore, George Takei decided to write this article after a Fox News interview with Carl Higbie, where they talked about a national Muslim registry, and he said that they did it during World War II with Japanese people and that there is precedent for it. And this explains the title of his article, George Takei, They Interned My Family, Don't Let Them Do It to Muslims.
To analyze this article, we're going to split the title in two. First of all, we're going to focus on the first sentence of the title, They Interned My Family, and see how and why George Takei explains the internment. Then we're going to focus on the other part of the title, Don't Let Them Do It to Muslims, and see how the author makes a link between what happened to Japanese people in the USA during World War II and what's happening to Muslims nowadays in America.
George Takei starts his article by telling us that there is dangerous talk at the government. He specifically talks about the interview where Carl Higbie said that there is precedent for the fact that Japanese people were put in camps. These words opened all the wounds in the heart of the author, who decided to explain what happened, especially to him and his family, during this dark time of the history for us to understand. As we all know, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor during World War II. Then the USA, presided by Franklin Roosevelt, at that time declared war on Japan and decided that Japanese people living in America were the accomplices of their enemy, so they treated them consequently.
George Takei tells us that his family was deported when he was only 5 years old. They were placed in different locations until the moment where the family disembarked in a camp encircled by wires in the fetid swamps of Arkansas, where they were living like prisoners, using a common latrine and the common mess hall, eating nasty food, the entire family living in a single small room, if we can call it that way, etc., etc. All that with armed guys looking upon them all the time, and the beautiful flag of the United States of America above them all, fluttering in the wind, while they were forced to recite the words to the Pledge of Allegiance. 120,000 people lost everything, their homes, their livelihood, and more importantly, their freedom.
And all that in the name of what? For what reason? What did they do to go through this? George Takei gives us the response and tells us that the distinction between the Japanese-American enemy and the peaceful and patriotic one was impossible. So the USA has simply decided that all of them should be presumed guilty and charged.
George Takei comes back to that horrible event in this article by analyzing it differently than his younger self, living in a camp and believing that this was a normal life for him. He explains to the reader that the internment was not only an assault upon a minority, but also an assault upon the Constitution itself, which is supposed to guarantee due process and equal protection for all. Decades and decades later, the United States of America under Reagan apologized for the internment and offered symbolic monetary reparations to the survivors.
And this horrible story that so many people lived, including the author, is the reason why George Takei was hurt by the words of the representative of Donald Trump, who talked about it like it was just a policy and not a human tragedy. But this is not the only reason why George Takei was hurt and wrote this article.
There's also the fact that, in his opinion, the exact same thing is happening right now to Muslims, hence his warning, don't let them do it to Muslims. Indeed, during the interview of Higbie, they were talking about a national Muslim registry. But George Takei wants us to understand that the internment of Japanese people has begun in the exact same way, and we all know what happened after.
Japanese people were all seen as guilty because of the war between Japan and the USA, and now Muslims are seen like terrorists because of the terrorist attacks, especially the 9/11, made by people who call themselves Muslims, while they are absolutely not. And that's what alarmed the author.
Furthermore, George Takei reminds us that Donald Trump himself said that he didn't know if he would have been against or for the internment if he had lived in this area. He said, "I would have had to be there at that time to tell you, to give you a proper answer. I certainly hate the concept of it, but I would have had to be there at that time to give you a proper answer." Higbee also once told the New York Times that he was not in favor of camps, but that there is historical, factual precedent to do things that are not politically popular and sometimes not right in the interest of national security. For the author, this is a very serious subject, and that means that for the government, if they keep seeing Muslim Americans as enemies, they could reinstall the internment system to protect America. All of this, plus the bad and hateful atmosphere against Muslim Americans, pushed the author to write this article to warn Americans that this is not normal and that this could be the beginning of another human tragedy.
As a conclusion, let's remind ourselves of what we said. George Takei wrote this article because he was hurt and felt betrayed by the words of Higbee in an interview. He took it personally because he lived the internment, and he took it very seriously because he felt the same thing was happening to Muslims. So he decided to write this article called "They Interned My Family, Don't Let Them Do It to Muslims," to explain to us what happened in the past and what might happen in the future if we don't change things.
This text is very important in its context because it warns people about a real subject, which is the discrimination and the vilifying of a minority, and even if it was published only 4 years ago, so much has happened after in agreement of what he said, like the Muslim ban in the USA, for example, only 3 months later. And let's not even mention what is happening in other countries, like the genocide of Muslim Uyghurs in China, for example.
And now, as you can see, this is the meme we made to illustrate the article.
In our meme, we can see Donald Trump signing something and then posing in front of the camera. And as a catchphrase, we wrote, "When you apologize for interning Japanese Americans, but then you realize you want to do the same thing to Muslims."
We chose that catchphrase because, as the article says, the USA apologized for what they did to Japanese Americans during World War II, but now they began to do the same thing to Muslim Americans. We chose Donald Trump to represent the idea because he is the actual president of the USA, so he does represent the government. Even if it wasn't under his presidency that the USA apologized. We think that our meme is a little bit funny, but also very serious. We think that it does represent the article.
So this is the end of our video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.